recognize that. That is Japanese for California roll.
Bafta. That's right, you heard me, Bafta. Oh wait, what's that? You don't know what Bafta is? You say Bafta sounds like the death rattle of a tauntaun? That's okay, I mean, it's British, so who really gives a shit, right?
Basically, what I was thinking of was, oh fuck, I can't believe you've done this.
I'm kidding. I love you British bastards, fish and chips, sidewalks that are so littered with pubs that you can drunkenly stumble out of one and yet somehow find yourself falling into yet another bar stool with a pint ready to go for you. Who doesn't love that? And I would be remiss if I didn't mention those sexy accents.
Oh, behave.
But you know what I don't love? The British Academy of Film and Television. To be fair, I don't really hold the American Academy in that high of a regard either. A pretentious circle jerk full of self-obsessed, air-headed buffoons who have become increasingly more interested in pandering to woke mobs and covering up their own pedophilic tendencies. Allegedly. As we see our media becoming more watered down year after year, thanks to cynical suit-wearing demons who head up the major film, television, and gaming industries alike. We've seen the popularity of once great television events like the Oscars drop faster than an Antifa soy boy in a fistfight. While the popularity of the Academy Awards are on the decline with mainstream audiences, they still hold significant sway when it comes to entertainment. Join me in today's video where I'll be showing you BAFTA's baffling new forced diversity and inclusion checklist and talk about the major implications that this has not only on the entertainment industry, but art itself. There's no better way to stifle creative freedom than with corporate or committee-mandated diversity quotas. Take a moment and imagine a world in which Black Panther was called Too Black. You have a film set in a fantasy region of Africa, where a majority of people are black, by the way. You have a character whose African heritage is very important to his character, and I don't mean just as him being the king. I also mean the mantle of the Black Panther. But guess what? BAFTA doesn't want that. You have to have more diversity. You have to hit a certain quota. You see, there is a system in place now, and you have to follow it, or guess what? No award for you. When you artificially limit what a creator can do by dictating their character attributes like race, gender, sexual preference, what species they identify as, you're going to end up with a much more inferior product than if you would have just left the creative minds to do their things. Let them be creative. It is what they do, after all. Back in June this year, it was reported the Oscars will now have a diversity requirement in order to be eligible to win an Oscar. Now, there's no concrete details as to what those requirements will be, but now the British Academy of Film and Television has given us a glimpse into the identitarian utopia's ideal for what constitutes award-worthy entertainment. Now, there is a lot of garbage to sift through in this literal tokenism checklist that BAFTA has released. So what I'm going to do is leave a link down in the description below so you can go through this entire thing yourself. That way you get a full picture of how disgustingly patronizing this list is, and of course the obvious negative effects that this is going to have on the entertainment industry. The checklist pertains to games at the moment, but I think that it can easily be extended to film and television. Now, BAFTA breaks down their criteria in 4 different sections. Section A, in-game representation, themes, and narratives. Section B, creative leadership and development team. Section C, industry access and opportunities. And Section D, player-based development. Let's kick off the absurdity with Section A, which states, To achieve standard A, you will need to meet 3 of the criteria below. Oh wow, that's pretty nice. I mean, at least they give you the option of how you'd like to pander and carry out your tokenism. The first 2 sections talk about the lead/playable character along with characters in a game. Both of these sections are mostly the same and include criteria such as a 50-50 gender split, 20% belonging to an underrepresented ethnic group, 10% LGBTQ+, 7% D/deaf and disabled. Just a small tidbit here real quick before we jump into the thick of the video. Since most of this list is about representation, I'm curious to see how Bafta came up with these percentages. 10% LGBTQ, 10% LGBTQ+, you say? According to the Office for National Statistics, the population above the age of 16 who don't identify as heterosexual is just 6.8%, making the Bafta regulation overrepresenting the groups of people in the UK, which of course is where Bafta's from. It's a small point, but seeing as how Bafta's throwing out these percentages at random, I figured, why the hell not? And to be clear, I don't mind if gay people are in the game. Make the whole game be full of gay characters. I don't give a shit. I don't think a character's sexuality should really play into the hero's journey. I mean, look at The Last of Us 2. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find gamers who said, you know what, I really connected with Ellie more because she likes to get nose deep in some snatch. But really, if the characters are gay, then they're gay. If they're straight, then they're straight. This all gets so tiresome. Like, now you're gonna have to worry about the character's sexual preferences throwing off your percentage values by being bisexual? Like, what does that count as? 0.5%? I don't know. How does this work? You're gonna have that one bisexual guy and you gotta tell him to calm the fuck down because he's throwing off the ratio. Then there's a section saying that you should explain where there are characters that are not frequently portrayed on screen and how the game is not making them into stereotypes. So let me get this straight. Not only is it on the developer to overly represent a minority group, but then you also have to comment in the game about how you're not racist. Is that how this works? Now let's take a look at a little game that came out recently. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's called Ghost of Tsushima.
You Mongolian! Don't you break down my wall! Get out of here! You Mongolian!
Now, if you couldn't tell by the name, Ghost of Sushi is set in Japan. You play as a Japanese samurai, and I make the point to say Japanese samurai because I don't want you thinking you're playing as Tom Cruise. This isn't the Last Samurai Simulator. You aren't playing some white guy in the game, that's the point that I'm making here. You have an American studio making an incredibly detailed, albeit historically inaccurate game about the Mongolian invasion of Japan and the brave samurai warriors who fought them back. The game showcases the iconic beauty of Japan and a very romanticized depiction of the skilled samurai warrior. So here we have a game about an underrepresented group of people. Not too many games heavily feature Asian people except for, I don't know, Sleeping Dogs and World War II games, but I mean, World War II games, a majority of your time is spent torching Japanese soldiers like Geonosian bugs. But you know what happens when you make a game like Ghost of Tsushima? You get people screeching about how the game is culturally appropriating Japanese culture. Do you remember when they announced this game, they had the white guy go out there playing the flute? It was really cool, but of course people lost their shit, and the people that lost their shit were immediately put in their place by somebody who actually knows what they're talking about. But of course, not only is the game appropriating Tom Cruise and his bravery, but the game is also racist. Because the Japanese were imperialists, I guess? I don't know. People, get your shit together. I mean, right, the game is racist. How dare they kill those Mongols? They just wanted to rape and pillage peacefully. Peacefully rape and pillage villages, yeah. Now, as far as stereotypes go, would you consider Ghost of Tsushima to enforce stereotypes about Japanese people? Stoic, honorable, humble? How about the murderous and violent Mongolians? Hashtag not all Mongolians. To me, it sounds like Ghost would be in violation of Bafta's regulation, as it further enforces stereotypes of these groups of people, albeit one positive and one negative. Subsection 3 of Section A states the main storylines, themes, or narratives of the game should be about underrepresented groups, which ties in with Subsection 4, stating that all elements of the game be about underrepresented groups. Are you seeing a theme here? Do you see the pattern? Stick with me for a second. If I make a game, and it was about these green little amoeba-like creatures called flungdingers, and they coexist with another species of amoeba-like creatures who are a slightly darker shade of green, and they're called grungeldingers. The whole point of the game is to collect resources and make your home world Gorfdo the most powerful and secure amoeba world that you can. Bafta would expect me to have that main narrative of the game be some allegory for underrepresented groups in society? Quote, the game should demonstrate diversity across the majority of the playtime in order to meet A3, not just a single section or element. So, if somebody wanted to make a stupid, fun game like Flungdinger's Odyssey, they have to find a way to force it into being some kind of game about the underclasses of the world. It could be the most technically sound base building and resource management game ever, but it would be disqualified from winning an award because, according to Bafta, it lacks diversity. Too much green, I guess. Yeah, in this case, it's the goddamn green supremacist. Bafta is chock full of them. We gotta do something. Down with Bafta. Boycott Bafta. Here's the real kicker section though. Location. The setting is wholly or partially in an underrepresented region or community. If the game takes place in an imagined or fantastical setting, please detail how this relates to the real-world underrepresented regions or communities. Why? What is it with these identitarian troglodytes and this overwhelming urge to tie things into the real world? What if we want a fantasy game? What if we want to escape a little bit? Nope. Sorry. What's that? You want to relax? Maybe you had a long day at work? Well, here, kick back and play the new Schindler's List game. That'll be relaxing. Obviously, I'm being hyperbolic, and it's not to say that I don't enjoy fantasy games with some politics. Hell, two of my favorite fantasy setting games of all time are The Witcher 3 and Divinity Original Sin 2, but that doesn't mean that I want game developers to have to make some disgusting connections to the real world, like a few months ago when we had fucking retards on Twitter claiming that orcs are stand-in for black people. Like, Jesus Christ, dude. Do you not see who the racist here is? Well-adjusted people don't see black people and go, look at that fucking green skin. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about sections B and C only because it's seemingly your standard diversity and inclusion, affirmative action type discriminatory hiring. What Bafta is trying to tell you is not to hire based on who's most qualified. They're telling you to be sure to pull out your color palette and then hold it up to them and say, you're the right shade for this job. They want you to check their sexual orientation during the interview. Imagine being a black woman, and you're going in to interview for your dream job at your favorite game company. You're highly qualified, and you have a great personality. Not only that, but you fucking nail the interview. Matter of fact, it's the best interview they've ever had. A few days later, you get a call from the studio and they tell you that they absolutely loved you. But sadly, they've already met their correct ratio for black women. They need a man now to ensure that they maintain that 50-50 gender split. Not only do academies like Bafta want to dictate who's in your game, where your game takes place, what's your game about, but they also want to tell you that only these people can make your game. The worst part is that they're not doing it based on merit, but instead they're doing it on the most shallow human characteristics. That should be the last thing on anybody's mind during a job interview if you're not a race-obsessed maniac. Section D starts off harmless enough. I think accessibility options are great. I mean, I have family members who suffer from epilepsy and friends who suffer from color blindness pretty severely, so accessibility options are nice. Though I don't feel that they're really reflections of the game's quality in terms of the narrative or the gameplay itself, especially when we're talking about winning awards, but whatever. Subsection D4 says that the game should utilize specialists and/or expert knowledge in order to engage with underserved players. So what that's telling me is that game developers should bring in more industry experts like Anita Sarkeesian, so she can lecture them on how they're being sexist and racist and ableist simply by making a game. I think their intentions are good here with this one, but you know the saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
You know what the devil said about hell?
What?
Welcome to hell. Who gives a shit? Free of hell.
Now, in some instances, I'm clearly taking these to the extreme. And I do this because recently, if you haven't noticed, the middle ground is rapidly shrinking like polar ice caps. And the extremes on both sides are what we're being left with. I am vehemently against these types of standards and regulations. When you read deeper than the surface language being used, you see the glaring issues. No longer are we hiring people based on their merits, based on what skills that they have or what they can bring to the company. Instead, they are being brought in because their skin matches the correct tone of the palette that their company happens to be lacking at that day and time. Video games as an art relies on creative freedom. It's requirement like these from Bafta and organizations like them that seek to destroy the creative process with corporately manufactured inclusion simply for the sake of inclusion, which is never a good thing. If you're a game developer who lives in a predominantly black area, it's more likely than not you're going to have more black people working for you, and there's nothing wrong with that, just as it's not wrong for any other race. You hire based on who's interested, who's most qualified for that position, regardless of their race, their gender, their religion, whatever. Now, it's easy to laugh this off as, oh, it's BAFTA, they're just British, it doesn't matter. Same goes for the Oscars, and that may be true. They don't matter to some of the public, but to these game developers, these publishers. They see an award that they can slap on their game, and they're going to want that. I mean, Jesus, do you remember the Arkham City box, for God's sake? Look how prestigious this game must be. It won so many awards. Bafta is attempting to socially engineer game developers by offering them a shiny award that the publisher can use in order to market their game. And I don't know about you, but I'd rather get the artistic vision from the creative minds themselves without influence from outside sources like Bafta. And that does it for today's video. I just hope that game developers and publishers keep in mind who they really need to be pleasing. Us, the fans, their customers, the people that keep coming back and giving them business. If they go under, it's not going to be because they had one too few of a race heading up their HR department. It's going to be because they're making garbage games. As always, I want to know what you think about all of this. Who do you think is going to be the next one to implement forced diversity hires when it comes to associations who dole out awards? Let me know down in the comments below. As always, if you like the video, drop a like, and if you really want to support my channel, hit the subscribe button and share this video on social media because it really does help me out. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter, by the way, at Metal Gear Mando, and until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.